Hello and welcome to Spirit Sherpa, the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. I'm Joshua Radewan, your co-host, here as always with spiritual coach and transformational shaman, Kelle Sparta. What's going on, Kelly?
Hey, baby. I got on the scale this morning for the first time in a week, and I'm down 20 pounds since my hernia surgery, so go me. Weird
Thank you.
thing. Weird thing. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast or not yet, but the moment I got done with the surgery, my entire intestines and everything reset. So like my cravings for sugar, my cravings for salt, everything went away. I'm like really wanting protein. I'm really like not eating a ton. My desire for carbs is down dramatically. It's so strange. And the doctor said that that's actually a pretty common thing that he hears from people who've had abdominal surgery. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder what that is. And
Well,
I think it's because they give you this massive broad spectrum antibiotic. And then, I started building back up with my probiotics. And so I think that it killed off all the bad bacteria that were asking for all those things. And so, now I'm just rebuilding with good gut bacteria. And so that's helping my body to want to be slimmer and my hunger to be different, which is weird, right? But it's cool.
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you're down a lot of weight since you moved to Panama in general, just
Oh,
the
big
clean
time.
eating. And, I got to say myself, I've been, since I ended up on the latest stop on Walkabout, I've been doing the vegetarian thing, and I seen the bloating go down from processed food. It's interesting, even the meat. Like I've always been a big meat eater. My whole life. I'm from the Upper Bible Belt. It's meat and potatoes and cheese, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
But since making that shift, like I'm down a few pounds too, putting on more muscle, and it goes counterintuitive to everything they teach you, which is kind of why we teach the paradox of what
Right.
we're programmed to believe.
Yes. Yeah. When I was living in Boston, my ankles would be like this big around. They were huge. I was constantly feeling like the skin was being pushed to its limit. And, they got a little bit smaller in Richmond, but when I got down here, my ankles are tiny now. They're
Yeah.
teeny tiny. I'm like, "Ah, amazing, right?" So it's amazing what, moving more. So the moving more brought them down some in
Mhm.
Richmond because in Boston I had so many stairs to go up and down just to get in and out of my house, and my knees hurt so bad, and it was really hard. I would literally crawl up the stairs at the end of the day. Um, and and that was just such a mental barrier to getting out of the house. So in Richmond, I got an apartment on the ground floor, 0 stairs to get in and out of the house, and I was like, "Okay." And I got out and I walked more. Here, I'm not walking as much, but I'm sweating a lot more, and so that's actually clearing a lot of the ick from the system, and I think that's why my ankles are so tiny now. Um, so yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, these days, so, whatever. Things are happening, and it's December 11th when we're recording this, and so this will come out in a month or month and a half or so. And we're in the middle of the everybody's being told to sit down, shut up, and do nothing phase, right? And I've been in this phase for 2.5 months now, and I'm like, okay, I for the first couple of months, first I was in surgical recovery and the first month, and the second month is a little bit more of that. And then I sent Jeff away for a couple of days to a nice hotel so that he could have a break from having to take care of me for 2 months. Because he was getting cranky, and boy does not get cranky, man. Boy is the most calm, smooth, easygoing person you'll ever meet. In fact, the last time you guys were down for a retreat, I was reminded by one of the participants yesterday, yeah, a few days ago, that they asked Jeff to be their spirit animal.
Everybody did. Everybody there did.
It's, it's like because that's just who he is. He's Mr. Chill and Cool, right? And when he's getting cranky, I'm like, "Ooh, okay, time to take some time off. You're beyond empty. Let's get you filled up. Couple days to yourself, doing nothing, and nobody bothering you, nothing to do anyone for anyone. All the whole thing. Um, so he finally realized how tired he was by the time he got back, and he was like, "Oh my god." I'm like, "Yeah." So he and I both dropped down for naps right after our last call yesterday. So It's yeah, it's
I think
been
that's my favorite part of integration. The naps. I remember talking about it in psychic mastery. I was like, I just kind of sleep myself through these periods. And Kathy looked at me kind of sideways, like, and I was like, oh, it works for me. I'm 5 weeks into integration now. I mean, like, that's really good for me. I mean, like, it took me 4.5 years to actually just be like, it's time to, allow those things to come through that you've been putting all the work in to accomplish. And I've now I see it. I'm like, wow, my nervous system is good. And it was actually the last thing you said to me, which, it's a section of boundaries. But it was the boundaries with spirit that I had never said. So since we're doing an episode on boundaries today, I think that's a good place to, either start or definitely reach into at some point. Cause
well, and thank you for the segue. So, so and that brings us to the topic for today. Our topic, yes, which is we're going to talk about boundaries for spiritual practitioners, and uh, let's start with that one. Boundaries with spirit, right? It is important, and I've said this several times over the course of the podcast, but it's been 8 years, and maybe you don't remember something from 6 years ago, but the boundaries for spiritual practitioners is super important, right? You have to set boundaries with spirit. And that means you got to be able to tell them, look, give me a week off. I'm exhausted. Stop downloading in my brain in the middle of the night, right? Or, you know, I am taking integration time. Stop sending me new shit, right? And, personally, I think for you, Josh, some of it was, them going, are you sure you're actually doing it this time? Are you sure?
Well, I mean, it was funny because as soon as I decided to take integration, it's like, oh, here's an object in your family's home that has something attached to it, and I'm like, I must do all of the things. I'm going to have to take this thing to Arizona to reunite it with its rightful owners, and you're like, that was the look you gave me, right? You're like, and then other things come up, and you're just like, oh, honey, you could deal with all of that, but guess what? Not now because you're on integration.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm on integration. That's right. Stop it.
Right. All of this is not integration. Yeah, and so, just setting some boundaries with spirit and with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole "Ooh, I can do this, blah blah blah" thing that happens when you get something in. And it's like, you can keep running a million miles a minute, but eventually you're going to face plant on the floor and wonder why you did. And then when something big shows up that actually needs to be dealt with in the moment, you will not be ready for it, right?
Right.
And that brings me back to the time that's going on right now, which is everybody's being told to sit down, shut up, and do nothing. And that is its own thing, right? It's been 2.5 months for me. And I'm just now starting to feel like I could do more. Um and I felt inspired to do something, I don't know, a month ago, and I got like 2 hours done, and then I was done. You No inspiration after that. I got something done yesterday. Like, okay, but I'm at the point where I feel like I could do stuff at this point. But I'm still being told that it's going to be slow and quiet until the new year, right? So, there's this whole thing that's happening, and mm, it makes me feel like, given the fact that I've been hearing this from a lot of people, it makes me feel like something big is coming at the beginning of the year, or, shortly into next year. I'm thinking probably February, when we switch from the year of the snake into the year of the horse, right? Um, but yeah, it's not feeling like it's January. It's feeling like it's more, like February, March timeframe, right? Um, and so now February is really more the thing. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this will be airing just before that, so you guys can check on me and tell me whether or not I was right? Because I won't remember predicting this by then. I'm channeling 2/3 of the time on this show, so
It was a couple weeks ago when we were looking for more topics. I was like, we were looking to get a little bit of farther ahead in the pipeline again because we kind of played it to the bone during integration here and
Yeah.
recovery. And, I was like, "Well, we just, do 9 a week and just see how well we do at predicting the future. Let's go full Nostradamus mode." But
Like,
we carry
doing 9 episodes a week, you're out of your mind.
I mean, that's why you work with me.
'Cause you're out of your mind?
Absolutely.
I don't think so, no. But right. So, back to the topic. So, there's this boundary that we have to set, right? So, in this case, the boundary is with yourself, right? Not pushing yourself to overwork when you're being told not to work, right? So there's a boundary you have to set with yourself because our default, if we haven't finished doing our work yet, then our default is our doingness is our value. And when your default is your doingness is your value, it's very hard to sit down and do nothing, right? And so that's part of the work we do in the Woo Squared program, right? Is to get you out of that space and into a space where you are valuable just being you, right? And so that's, boundaries with yourself, right? No overworking when you're supposed to be sitting still. Boundaries with spirit. I need to get a full night's rest. I need to have integration time. Yeah, because a lot of spirits don't have any experience of being in physical form. So they have no idea that we have rent to pay, that we have, you know, uh, sleep requirements, food requirements. They don't understand any of this because none of that's relevant in the spirit world, right? So you've got to educate them and you've got to set boundaries with them. Okay. And then boundaries with clients. Okay. So we've talked about the easy things so far, right? Although setting boundaries with yourself is simple, but not always easy. But regardless, we know what we're supposed to do. Doing it is more of a process. But the when you start to set boundaries with clients, you have to be really careful when you're doing this. So as practitioners, we can often overinvest in our clients' outcomes. And we've talked about this in the past, right? Where you're like, have to prove that I'm a good practitioner by getting XYZ outcome for the client, right? But you have no control over that. Let me be very clear with you. You have no control over whether or not the client gets the outcome. You can do everything right, and the client can still not get the outcome because they're not open to receiving it. And that is just the nature of the beast. And so you have got to pull back from the outcome being the thing that's the challenge. If you're still having to prove yourself through outcome, you shouldn't be charging for clients. You should be doing free services until you can prove to yourself that you know what you're doing, and then you can start charging. Because otherwise, you're going to be in this sort of wounded healer space, right? And that's not the best place to be in. So, a wounded healer, for definition, is someone who is emotionally unclean around the work. So either somebody can say something that triggers you to a point where you're no longer able to be present for the work that you're doing. You can't like push it back and deal with it later, right? Or you're emotionally attached to the outcome of the process, and therefore you're going to put yourself in a position to manipulate, which is not a clean process, right? There's a lot of ways in which you can be off in this. If you haven't cleared your energy field from the previous person because you didn't know to do that, and now you're bringing the other person's crap into the person who's on the table, that's not good. If you haven't cleared your space and you've got a sea of ick on your floor that never gets cleaned because you didn't know to do that, that's a problem, right? If you haven't cleared you or your home and you've got entities or, schmoogies or demons or open portals or crap like that in your space and you're inviting people in, that's a problem. All of these things can contribute to the wounded healer side of things, right? And so this is another internal boundary that you do, which is to set a boundary for yourself that you won't be doing this sort of stuff until you are ready to do it. by having learned the processes to get it done properly, right? And, everybody loves Reiki and they all want to start at Reiki. And I'm a Reiki master teacher and I'm an angelic Reiki master teacher and, yeah, the whole 9 yards. And I will tell you that at no time during any of that did I get all the training I needed to do this well. So, and I learned from an Incan shaman and Reiki teacher. And so, and even then the education wasn't fully developed for me. A lot of it I had to add in from my other practices and things that I learned along the way. So, what I'm saying is that a single piece of training may not be sufficient. So, make sure to educate yourself. So, I want to talk about some of the client stories where I've had to set boundaries in the past. And I want to talk about some red flags for clients that I want you to look for if you are a practitioner and you're out there, looking to work with people. So, the first red flag, and I've seen this multiple times in my career, is the person who says, "No one has been able to help me. I've tried everything. I've gone to everyone and no one can help me." Okay. That is a huge red flag. That is I am going to come in and be an energy vampire and suck your energy and then say that you suck as a practitioner. And I'm going to say that I'm going to refuse all the energy that's coming in so that I can continue to feel like a victim in this scenario and add you to the list of people who have victimized me by taking my money and doing nothing for me, right? And that is exactly what that person is saying when they tell you nobody has been able to help me. Okay? So I just want to be really clear that if you and this is the weird thing or the dangerous thing about this particular statement is that if you have not done the work to see your own value, you will get sucked into this by trying to be the savior who comes in and saves them, right? This is if you feel if somebody says this to you and you're like, "Here I come to save the day," if that's where you go, you have a problem. You are in a wounded state that you should not be trying to do work for other people because this is going to come and bite you in the butt. Okay. I understand if this happens for you because I've had it happen to me many times or much earlier in my career. The most recent situation was a friend of mine who's another practitioner reached out and somebody was having issue with somebody from West Africa doing work on them without their permission, theoretically. They said, "Oh, they made a voodoo doll out of me." And I'm like, "Are you in West Africa?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Then how did they make a voodoo doll? Because you need a piece of the person's body to make a voodoo doll. You need blood, you need hair, you need something. And your nail clippings, something." And and I said, "You could do it with somebody's energy, but that's the least powerful version because they could always just rip that back, That's super easy, right?" And I said, "Just call your energy back," because, they were like, "No, well, they don't they did it with my energy." I'm like, "Just call your energy back. It's your energy. Call it back. Nobody has power over it once you decide you want it." And she, of course, was like, "I can't do that. Ah, I'm under attack," you know? And I'm like, "Okay." Yeah. And my friend referred it to me because she isn't familiar with West African practices and things like that. Um, and so she was like, "I can do healing work with her here." And, she was in physical proximity with the person. She said, "But, I'm not familiar with the practices and she says it's not working and da da da." I'm like, "Yeah, red flag, red flag, red flag," right? And 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 of course the woman's like, "I don't have any money. I've paid all my money out to everybody else. Can't you do it for me and I'll pay you later?" I'm like, "I like you said, let me be clear, okay? There are times that I will be willing to do that if it's necessary. But when you've got somebody who's a walking red flag also asking to not pay you, it's just like, oh God, no. It's just like one more nail in the coffin, right? So it was clear to me that this person and I looked I did. I did a quick look and I'm like, you're in this life to learn what it's like to be a victim because you victimized others in another life. And so you're learning what it's like to have that experience. The question you have to ask yourself is, are you ready to be done with it? And that's all I wrote this to her. I mean, free, no cost consultation. I was just like, I did a quick look and I'm like, this is why it's happening. If you are done with the lesson, just say you're done. You gotta actually say you're done, not be like, "Oh, uncle, I'm sorry, please stop hurting me." That's still the victim energy, right? You gotta be like, "Done. Lesson learned, done," right? And then pull your energy back and, close them out. It's that simple, right? And she was just like, and I'm like, "Okay." I that is clear to me that no amount of work I do is gonna make a difference. Right? Because they are committed to the path that they're on. They're committed to being in that space. And when someone is committed to being where they are, getting them out of there is nigh on impossible. And if you do it, if you manage it, it will not hold. Okay? If you manage it in the moment, it will not hold. So you have to be able to walk away from those scenarios because those are people who committed to a path. Right? And they are getting the lesson that they wanted. They are having the journey they asked for. They are, because they're not willing to come out of it. Right? And so that's the piece you have to recognize. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's reality, right? And so when you're doing any sort of spiritual work with people, you have to be careful about that. The other piece is and so Elizabeth sent us a whole bunch of ideas again for the podcast. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. And we're going to be doing an episode that she suggested next. But I want to reference this because she asked for an answer to a question, and it's not enough for a whole episode. But I do want to provide the answer to the question, which I'm now forgetting what it was. My brain was right there and now it's gone. And so now I have to go look and see what was the question. So one of the things that she asked about was what is a dangerous deity versus a not dangerous deity to do work with and working with helper spirits and things like that. And I don't want to do a whole episode on that because I don't think there's enough to talk about there. I've already said a lot of the stuff, but the first thing is all deities are dangerous. Let's just start there. Okay. Deities have their own agendas, and those agendas may or may not include using you in ways that are not in your best interests. And so, anytime you make a deal with a deity or any other entity for that matter, where you owe them something, you are at risk, period. Now, this is one of the reasons why I work on empowering all my clients so that they are fully in their own power and not needing to borrow power from other places, right? Now, things like guides and guardians and helper spirits like, spirit animals and things like that, those are less dangerous, okay? And I say less dangerous because if you haven't set up your wards and found your guides inside of them yet, you don't know if your guides are benevolent or not, even though they may have seemed to be. I've had more than one student who set up their wards and found their guides on the outside. And that's because they weren't guides. And so, that's a thing, right? This is why you have to learn how to set up your protections, right? And then secondly, there are entities that can masquerade as other entities. So, you ask Rabbit for something, and Rabbit gives you a response that says, "I'll ask you for a favor later." That is not Rabbit. Okay. Any entity that responds, any spirit animal that responds with "I'll ask you for a favor later" is not a spirit animal. It's something else masquerading as a spirit animal, right? And spirit animals are going to say things like, "Okay, I just want you to eat vegetarian for the next week," or "I want you to leave an offering out for me in the backyard," or something, right? They say things that are, uniquely animal based responses. But, asking for a favor in the future is not a spirit animal thing. Let's be clear. Okay. So, this is the sort of thing where I'm like, you got to know what you're looking at. You got to have your protections up. You got to be clear what's walking in the door, and that's how these things work, right? So is it dangerous to work with them? Sometimes, yes. And, your guardian angels in general are mostly okay, right?
As a guy who's done a lot of work with angels, I would say, a lot of work with the archangels, which are a little bit different than
Yeah.
traditional angels. They will also throw you through the ringer, but I don't even want to say it's more gently. It's probably gentle to them, but they operate on a different, different structure. So, what they're giving you what you ask for, but it's not going to feel like how it's going to feel. It kind of goes back to that all, be careful what you ask for you will surely get it. And in this case, you will get the help that you ask for, but it's not going to necessarily, always feel good.
Yeah.
Working with the lower tiered angels, I have found, as well as the guardian angel. That one's really, like that is really the go-to if you're trying to bring
Yeah. The
things.
guardian angel is probably your safest bet. Yeah. So, but remember that angels only work for so long before you have to ask them again, right? It's
Right.
usually like every day you have to ask them. But they can be super helpful. I would again, the archangels are a little bit. They're kind of like the difference between plugging into a wall socket and grabbing onto a high tension wire, right? The difference, right? Um, and so be careful with the archangels, but um, when you're working with any entity other than yourself, then you're subject to whatever agenda that entity has. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And so this is the other reason why I'm constantly like, okay, tap directly into source for X and, here's the archetype for Y and, all of these things because you've got to have a way to deal with it, right? So, all right. So boundaries.
Boundaries with deities.
Boundaries with deities. And the boundaries with deities is just avoid, right? That's your best bet. Um, and if you make a mistake like I did, a couple years ago, and calling on Oshun, and then having all these Ifas from around the world reach out and say, "Oh, you owe Oshun a boon, and she has asked me to reach to you because you are not paying attention," and da da da. Da. I mean, people from I'd never heard of reaching out to me, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And so, I did my penance. I did a boon for her. I set up an altar and I fed the altar. I gave her a prominent place in the kitchen and, took over an entire island that was workspace and made a beautiful altar to her and whatever. And she the entire time kept trying to claim me. And I'm like, no, no, no. This is payment for the boon. That's it. I am not your daughter. You'd never let a deity call you daughter or son. Never let them do that because that's them claiming you. Okay. And I'm like, this is a boon. I'm paying back the boon, right? And at the end of a week, that was it. And she did occasionally come back in and be like, "Hello, daughter." And I'm like, "Still not your daughter. Respect. I'm out, right?" So, they will come back over and over again. And it's just a lot of extra work. Why bother? Right? So just don't, you know. And so when you're doing your work as a spiritual practitioner, knowing how to say yes and no appropriately is important. And this is the other piece, right? Is that we were talking about. Oh, that was the other piece that Elizabeth had talked about that I'm not going to do a whole episode on, which is courting. And I've covered this before in a previous episode, but when we, there's a lot of information out there around cord cutting. And, because the idea is that we create cords between each other as we create relationships. But as empaths, we don't cord, we mix our energies with other people. And so we don't have cords to cut. We have to filter our energy out of them and filter their energy out of us, right? And so you have to be very careful when you're doing healing work on a client that you have pulled your energy field in. And if you haven't gotten the Boundaries for Empaths class off the website, it is free. Please go and get that class if you have not done so, because it will change your life and it will also make you a better healer. Okay. So it's at kellysparta.com. Just go and look for the lady with the crystal. Click on that and you'll get the free class. Okay. And you have to learn how to pull your energy back so that you're not mixing your energy with the client that you're working on, because that makes it even worse, right? Because now your crap is in them, their crap is in you. How can you be sure everybody's clear when you're done? It's just not good, right? And so, this is another way in which we have to set appropriate boundaries as practitioners. And so there are times in advanced practices where you may blend to help process emotions, but you really need to know how not to blend before you ever get to those practices. Because if you don't know how to not do it, then you're going to do it badly when you do it, right? So, yeah, you're going to mess yourself up and mess them up and everything else. So there are times when it's appropriate, but for the average practitioner out there right now, you should not be doing this. Okay. All right. So, boundaries. We talk about energetic with the client, talk about, recognizing the red flags and running away, right? Run away. Boundaries with spirit, right? Boundaries with yourself, right? What did I miss? Did I miss anything?
I think that sums it up. Boundaries with deities. And yeah, I think that is that wraps it up good. And don't forget, like she said, go check out the Boundaries for Empaths free download on kellysparta.com. That is an absolute must if you are. I mean, honestly, I would. No matter if you're listening to this, go get it. Go get it now.
Well, and it also will put you on the mailing list, and there's some I do a weekly newsletter on the mailing list where I'm writing an article every week for the stuff that's more timely, because we record in advance on this, and so stuff that's more timely, things that I want to talk about that are like right now that I want to make people present to, those come out on the newsletter. So you definitely want to sign up for the newsletter and make sure you whitelisted, because some of my stuff is landing in spam right now. So you want to make sure you see the email when it comes through. But and while you're there, take the quiz, because the quiz will tell you where you are in your readiness to be doing your shadow work and also to be getting ready to be a practitioner. And so the quiz is at the top of the page on pretty much every page, unless it's a service page. And it just says take the quiz, and that'll do it. So that'll give you an idea of where you are in the process. And if you don't get a response in your email box, please do let me know. We are having a little bit of problems with getting that delivery to happen. Check your spam filter, obviously, first. But then if you didn't get it, let me know, because I'm still working with my tech team on that for some reason. And, like every fifth or sixth person isn't getting it, which is weird. Doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, is what it is. So that all goes to say that please remember to set your boundaries when you are working as a spiritual practitioner, or even just as a spiritual seeker. Make sure you set your boundaries with yourself and with spirit at the very least. And that's it for this week. Remember that what you focus on expands, what you intend is what you create. So choose wisely. Have a great one.